Okay, we'll kick off our last presentation before afternoon tea. And we have Kayne Naughton with Focusing Security Monitoring with TTPs. If you can give him a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name's Kayne Naughton. I'm here representing COSIV. Some of you might have caught our training on Tuesday. We are primarily focused around threat intelligence tooling. We're very threat focused. We also do a lot of stuff around AusCERT. So we understand the way that a lot of large organisations run their security ops. I come from an offensive background. I still run a small pen test company, so we try and keep a bit of an eye on both sides of things. So, we learn how to attack better by looking at defence. We can help people defend themselves better by knowing how we attack. This is just for when I put these things online so you know what's what. I will have the products and things I'm referring to. I'll put links online afterwards, so don't bother trying to take photos of everything. It'll all be okay. So today, I guess the core of what I'm talking about is TTPs, which are tactics. So tactics is, and this all comes from, I guess, originally military terminology. Tactics is what someone's trying to do. You'll quite often see TTPs bastardised as being like tactics tools and procedures, but there's a bit of a semantic difference here. So we're talking about tactics, talking about techniques. A technique is a method or a quirk in the way that people do things. You won't necessarily just see these with an attacker. Like the way that you do something inside your environment, there's ways that you do things every day. There's a way you log into a machine. There's a way you look something up. There's a way that you add a user. Yeah, they're all techniques. They're just bits that you use day to day. And a procedure is effectively the way you're supposed to do things, which is not all the ways the way you do them, but it is, I guess, a documented standard for you should do this, then this, then this, then this. Particularly if you're worried about state-sponsored groups, you will find that a number of the more regimented threat actors out there who maybe wear military uniforms will very closely stick to their procedures all the time. They always type the same commands in the same order, and that's certainly part of their heritage in terms of coming from the military, but it's important to understand the difference in terms of what we're looking at here. So the idea is, when you're trying to monitor your environment, understanding an attacker's TTPs is very useful, but also trying to understand the TTPs of people inside your own organisation. If Jeff always arrives in the morning, plugs in his laptop and goes into AD and downloads a list of everyone's passwords, like, Jeff's weird, but maybe that's normal. It's unlikely. Whereas if Jeff does that out of the blue one day or logs on at midnight and starts doing stuff and that's not normal, then he's deviating from his ordinary TTP. So think about it from both sides, not just like studying threat intel and what attackers do. So we've got a bit of a model here. I was actually quite surprised. I don't do a lot around the seam space, so I've done a fair bit around, I guess, sort of skunkworks seam technology. But I'm not a good run function person. I'm a bit too chaos for that. So I was curious in terms of what people do around this. And there's really very few presentations talking about how people actually manage their seams. So we've got a bit of a model here just based on what we've seen out there on what I think a good approach is in order to better enhance what you're doing with your logs and your seam. Security, incident and event management. Sometimes you get a security incident management tool and a security event management tool. The sort of ways of splitting it up, but most people have it all together. Something like a Splunk or a QRadar or an elk stack. I'll talk a little bit about some of those later on, but that's what we're talking about, how to find these things in your logs other than by their express presence of, error 123 is there. That means you got hacked. That's nice if you've got it, but sometimes the absence of something or the timing of something is what you're looking for, not, you got owned coming from your firewall. Because if you're trusting your firewalls to tell you got owned, you're going to be disappointed. So the first thing you should do is look at your risks. There's a reason I've got Dilbert's pointy-haired boss here is you as a person who is operating security in your organisation are probably not very well suited to determine what your organisational or enterprise risks are. Like, if I was to say to you, what are your risks? And it's like, someone will drop ransomware, incorrect. The risk is that the data is unavailable, so your business is unable to function. You need to think about this from a business context, not a technical context. People tend to be very focused around what they look at. The same as security monitoring. A lot of people will, they gather all of the logs and stuff from their security appliances, because they run the security appliances. They think about the security appliances. They're not thinking about things like databases or SharePoint. I don't blame you if you don't want to deal with your SharePoint people. SharePoint's weird, but it's very important to understand your SharePoint logs, because it's probably where a lot of your business critical data lives. So yeah, think about risks. Risks are what your pointy-head boss cares about. Conversely, threats. Threats are what your attackers who are going after you think about. You can't have a threat really without a threat actor. It doesn't work that way. So you've got to think about the types of groups who might be trying to attack you, what it is that they want, what it is they're trying to achieve. In many cases, this might have nothing to do with your core business. Say you're a leasing company and you lease trucks to trucking companies. You're very much thinking about, oh, what if someone stole a truck? If the Australian government does something and then Anonymous decides to just go after anything in .au and deface it, like their motivation has nothing to do with the fact that you lease to trucking companies. They just want to deface a website. So I've seen a number of cases where e-commerce websites were defaced, just, like Albanian, Turkish hacker army or whatever it is, and they didn't even realise there was credit cards there. They just wanted something to deface to just move on with their lives. There's no, you have to separate what they want versus what you think is valuable. And sometimes there's going to be an intersection. If you are an e-commerce provider, they probably want credit cards, but that's not the only time you're going to see someone going after you. So think about the threats and actually what they want, not just from your own point of view. Put yourself in their shoes. And that can also be looking at what's happening to your competitors or other people in similar verticals overseas. It's very rare that you're the first person in the world to face a particular type of threat. Unless maybe like you're a mining company or a petrochemical or something, in which case you might see things that are unique. But otherwise, if you think you're the first person ever to see something, you're either incredibly on the ball or you just haven't been getting information from others about what's going on. So you try and learn from someone else so you don't learn the hard way. Scenarios. Scenarios are important because when you are trying to work out what you want to detect, you want to, say you've got a risk about, oh, I'm worried about someone stealing all of my SharePoint. You need to look at, well, what's the flow? How would someone do that? So what are the potential ways they can come into your environment? And where does the data going to come out from? So what is between where they come in and where they meet their objective? And I'll talk about some examples in a moment, but if you think about the kill chain models and things like that, you need to think about what would the process be or what are the potential sort of high-level processes that would get from one place to the other to meet the objective. And then also you need to look at, well, where do you have existing telemetry or logs along that path? I'll talk about some examples of this in a moment, but look at where you can find those logs. Maybe you need to put stuff in. Maybe you just don't have logs. Maybe that's a good place to start. If you are just putting in a newly, you just undone the shrink wrap off your servers and you're installing Splunk for the first time and going, all right, what logs do we put on? Maybe think about this from a risk perspective. Maybe don't onboard all your firewall logs for starters. Start with the bits where actual core data is held so you can understand how it's being utilised and accessed and what's normal in it. Because often, we always have to prioritise. I'm unaware of, maybe with a very few exceptions, people who have an unlimited security budget or unlimited security time. So you need to know where you prioritise. And if you at least have some scenarios as a straw man model, you can sort of work out where to go to get to that. Frameworks. I found this actually pretty disappointing. There's a number of frameworks from MITRE, like there's CAPEC and ATAC, just because they love acronyms and stuff. They're both designed as being taxonomies for attack patterns or for attack types or exploit types or so on, but they don't necessarily really cover the types of things that you might be looking for in your organisation from a holistic point of view. They might map well to a forensics exercise, but things like someone trying to do DNS enumeration isn't listed because they're very focused on they have 7 different ways to talk about SQL injection, but nothing to talk about how someone tried to get in and get access to your stuff. They'll have some common vulnerabilities, like the ability to transfer your domains if you've got your DNS set up wrong. But a lot of really common day-to-day attack patterns that we would do as pen testers just aren't covered because they're not thinking about it from that perspective. They're thinking about it from a forensics or from a compliance point of view. I also don't know why MITRE have 2 competing standards in the same space, but yeah, it's up to them. Most people end up rolling their own. So if you're thinking about how you class the different things that happen along the way, like things like privilege escalation and stuff like that, you want to sort of group things so you can go, oh, these are similar components. This is a good place we can target. Threat intelligence. Threat intelligence is good when you can get good specific threat intelligence. If you are downloading everything from everywhere and lots of open source stuff, you're probably just making a bigger haystack to find needles in, which is unfortunate. This is a diagram. It's a variant of Ryan Stillion's detection maturity model. So I think it's interesting from a couple of points of view. So if you look at the sort of the value of intelligence, there's the higher you go up the tree, you increase in robustness. For me as an attacker, like an atomic indicator, like a malware hash or a host and networked artifact, like, I don't know, yeah, IP address, host name or whatever. Like I can change that so easy. It's not even, I just change those things as a matter of course. They're also incredibly precise to detect. If there's a hash and you're looking for it and you find it, you know you've got the right thing. Whereas as you go up into tactics, techniques and procedures and strategies and so on, they're far more robust identifiers. With the exception of after Mandiant published their APT1 report, in which case the allegedly Chinese state-sponsored group sort of scurried back to their nests and retooled and did things very differently. But with the exception of that, pretty much no one ever changes their TTPs. It's such a it's the way that you work. It's part of your culture. It's the organisation you're in. You can't just go, oh, they've detected the way we work. Let's just work completely differently. Versus a malware hash, like you keep seeing like there's 2 billion or something new pieces of malware generated each year. It's the same 200 malware families that are just like compiled and encrypted in different ways. If you're relying on those ones down the bottom, they're very easy to detect, and if you've got an immature security organisation, they're easy to work with because you know what's what. But when you work your way up, it's a lot more robust. You don't have to worry so much about things changing underneath you. It's very easy if you're starting out, you don't know what a threat would look like to you, or you can look at some of like the APT reports or the Verizon data breach reports. They will quite often have little case studies that will say how organisations were breached. It's horrible when large amounts of people's private data gets made public, like the Target attack and so on. But the good side of that is that usually in the press you'll find a lot of news about the nitty-gritty of how something happened. And you can use that to inform yourself to go, all right, so what would we look for? How do these things work? Just like by way of an example of the sort of thing that might happen. So say you hear about a competitor has some sort of creature. Oh, you're not getting it playing over there. All right, let's try this. So, say you're in retail and you've got a problem with birds stealing chips. Yeah, it happens. It happens. It's not a cyber threat, but it's probably pretty demonstrative of the type of thing that we're dealing with. I'm going to try and find my mouse now. Oh, there we go. So, so that's good. So, you hear about it happening to someone else. Go, all right, so we're looking for ducks because the other people weren't very good at birds. This happens in cyber as well. There's a lack of fidelity. So we write our duck patterns. We're looking for ducks in our logs. All the CCTV cameras are looking for this particular duck that we heard about. And then it's like, oh, crap. Okay, sometimes there's ducks in bow ties. We didn't think about that in the model. Now we have to change the model a bit. Oh, God, ducks with shoes. All right, well, what about, okay, just any sort of like footwear or anything? Oh, ducks in hats? Maybe just ducks wearing like men's clothing. Oh no, now there's ducks in tutus. Like, you can keep playing this game. If you think about the cyber equivalents, you can do this all day, every day. If you've got a malware family and you're going every time someone packs it, it's as easy as a duck putting on a bow tie. Actually, no, it's easier because I don't know how they do it with their wings. But anyway, it's easier than a duck putting on a bow tie. If you look for the shape of birds, however, like a bird can't change its shape. Well, not easily. They can get a bit tubby or something. But yeah, think about silhouettes, think about patterns, think about outlines, not this particular thing that someone saw 2 years ago, because it's not going to help you. Like, it's already moved on. That duck's already changed its clothing. You will end up with situations like this where you get a false positive. It's a goat in a duck suit, but what are you going to do? So to give a bit more of a concrete cyber example for this, so like what a hacktivist attack might look like. So the path, they might use Tor to hide themselves. That's pretty good. They can't, if they're using Tor all the time, chances are that, that's part of their TTPs. I would hope that your legitimate your legitimate staff aren't probably using Tor. Many of your customers may, just because they're trying to protect their privacy online by funneling everything through a bunch of proxies that they don't control. But yeah, like that's one TTP that you might look for. The second thing is recon. So they might be using FiercePL or ReconNG to do DNS enumeration. The average client that connects to you doesn't do a whole heap of DNS lookups. That isn't going to, so there's a TTP here that you can detect that isn't normal. Port discovery, nmaps. Regularly people don't nmap you. There might be just noise on the internet, but anyone who connects to you and authorises after doing it, bad sign. Web app discovery, these things, thousands of hits on different pages that don't exist, bad sign. Vulnerability identification, all of this stuff that you would see as part of a hacktivist attack. You can look for this particularly in your logs. This is the sort of thing that most people do, putting in very specific rules or classes of attack, and you can start with this pretty easy. And then they put the database on pastebin. By this point, you're doomed anyway, but you can monitor pastebin and find out about the crime after it's happened. That's why most people, if you're in Troy's talk before, you know all about this. Unfortunately, that's not the way I'd recommend kicking off an incident response thing, is finding it posted publicly and then hoping no one else sees it, but it is a common way of doing things. But if you're talking about a tricky attacker, and this is where using TTPs comes into it pretty well. So they've dropped some sort of fileless malware via a browser exploit on one of your employees' machines that they've brought home for the weekend. So that's pretty hard to find. You don't really have any telemetry on that. Okay, so the path into the environment, they come in from your employee's laptop using the VPN client installed on it. Well, that's hard because that's matching your TTPs anyway. Exploitation, well, they don't need to exploit you. They've already got a password. They can log in. They can do a DLL hijack and an audio driver helper that hasn't been publicly made available. Any decent pen test company will have a bunch of little privilege escalation bugs that they've got in their back pocket. Attack groups will be the same. You can't rely on someone having seen it, written it up, and send it through to you for detection before. It's pretty tough. So you're not going to have a matching rule for this. Persistence. They might have a bit of a custom PowerShell rat that they inject into a process. Maybe the process injection you can find, but no one's ever seen the malware before. So you're seeing here that like signatures aren't going to help you. You don't have a signature for this stuff. It's new and unique. And these are like, we'll do this sort of thing as part of an engagement. It's not too over the top. Mimikatz to make a golden ticket. I think a lot of people are behind the 8-ball on this. They get hacked. Mimikatz is a tool that you can use to dump some sort of the internal credentials out of Windows, and a golden ticket is effectively an authentication token you can keep using everywhere. So last I heard, as far as Microsoft tell you, the only way that you can get past this attack is you basically have to reset all the keys twice on your domain controllers. So it's pretty persistent. But people don't think about this stuff, and it's very hard to find, very hard to see unless you really know what you're looking for. And like clearing the event viewer logs, I didn't realise people didn't know this was possible, but with the recent NSA hacks, it's been made a bit more public. So the fact that someone can just like delete the logs off your event viewer without there being an event. So if you're doing post-incident forensics, there's nothing there or it's been filtered. It makes life very hard. But once again, there's an absence of logs. There's nothing that you can search for. There's no signatures for this. It's just there is no logs. And action objective, they steal the M&A manager's PST file, so they got all the email off their desktop and off they go. They're off to the races. You never know that company you're bidding on, someone else beat you by 2% because they knew exactly what price you were going to put in for it. And that's usually what this stuff looks like. Billions of dollars go out the door that no one ever sees. So how to combat the trickery? Patching, boring, but you should probably do it. I know that sounds really obvious, but I guarantee you're all looking at the little stores out there looking at new widgets and doodads with blinky lights. Consider spending the money on patching. I know you're not going to, but it's all right. Require 2FA for remote users. And including security people. I don't know how many people I've seen, waggle their finger and chastise people about 2FA, but I don't see too many people using 2FA on their security tools. Require 2FA. Christina spoke about some of this stuff this morning about tricking people to reset soft tokens or to give you a long-lasting token, so there's some practice stuff around it, but 2FA is very, very difficult to get around regardless of the TTPs. Collect your Windows event, use the Windows event collector service, so you get all the logs when they come into the box. It means someone can't just nuke them afterwards. Admittedly, they can still filter, but it's a good idea. Alerting on the first execution of any binary. Does the TTPs of your regular users involve running just random executables that your organisation has never seen before? If they're a dev, sure, you're going to whitelist them. But if you've got Janine in accounting or something, and she's running a brand new executable that you have no reputation for, you've never seen it, and this is assuming you're not doing app whitelisting, that's weird. That does not match TTP. So you've got to think about TTPs for your users, for attackers, and try and align the two. Looking at the parents of processes, if Acrobat is spawning a bunch of things that are attached to a service, that's weird. That's not matching any TTP of most people's workflow. Lock down PowerShell in general and sign it. Do your regular users use PowerShell? No. Maybe you deploy a little bit of PowerShell, in which case you can sign it, put on a signing policy. Attackers can't use PowerShell to bounce around your environment without requiring any malware, which, if you haven't already heard, is the new hotness. If you're looking for Metasploit and stuff, then you're probably going to be disappointed because most people are using like PowerShell Empire and things like that because it's fileless, so it doesn't get dropped. AV can't understand it because it doesn't have a PowerShell engine, and it's nice and quick and clean. It can do everything you want Windows native. So PowerShell, yes. If you're not currently looking at logging, monitoring PowerShell, you should be. And why the dickens did a log get shorter without a 1102 event, which is like a someone cleared the audit log event? If there's logs missing and there's no event to say someone deleted the logs, then that's not right. All of these things, think about it from a TTP perspective. Maybe not specifically going, oh, what is this event? But look at ways that you can look at behaviours that you're not expecting. In general, passive DNS. Passive DNS is so good. Collect all of the DNS logs from all of your resolvers so you know what's going on inside your environment. It means if something does look a bit fishy, you can find out all of the other machines that are also doing the same thing. If you know who resolves things, it's easier to find out where something came from, where something got to. It's not the best, but it's the easiest. Gives you a lot of context, especially on things like CDNs. NetFlow, get NetFlow. If you haven't heard of NetFlow, if you remember last year, everyone was scared because the big boogeyman government wanted all your metadata. Your metadata is NetFlow. Any Cisco machine that is able to any Cisco device that can still run, even though the fan's full of dust and stuff, will still do NetFlow. It's been around forever. Gather NetFlow at your border, gather NetFlow internally. It should be ubiquitous, but I find it very rarely. And it doesn't take a lot of storage space. Look at things like why is a machine having a large amount of outgoing traffic? I spoke to someone from a small regional ISP years ago who whenever we'd call them up and say one of their customers was infected, it's like, yeah, no, I already spoke to him and sorted it out. After a while, it's like, how the hell does this guy have better intel than me? He knows about everything I want to tell him about. And it turns out it's because he was looking at NetFlow numbers, and he would find customers who had a lot of more outgoing than incoming on any given day, and they didn't normally, so he knew that there was something wrong with their computer even without knowing what it is. Yet I don't see large organisations doing that. Look at NetFlow. Definitely gather your NetFlow. Look at patterns. Look at what's normal. PCAPs. PCAPs are a whole... they're awesome. It's like a flight recorder for your entire network. It requires a bit of storage. Can be expensive, but it's pretty cool. Look at legal aspects and end user agreements and all of that stuff. I'm not your lawyer. Thankfully, I'd be an awful lawyer. But yeah, look at what you can do legally, but capturing network flow so you can replay stuff and find out what happened or look at the guts of things is incredibly powerful. Think about like an IPS, but you're just storing everything so you can retrospectively run an IPS rule if you find something that's a bit hinky. Getting slightly into the more technical side. Looking at time series, this screenshot is from... chronograph. So there's a thing called the tick stack, which is Telegraph, InfluxDB, chronograph, and capacitor. It's used by a lot of site reliability engineers and so on, but it's a database that's geared towards time series data. So you can tag things going, oh, it's this type of event, it's this type of whatever. When you look at anything as a time series and start doing the math on it, like why is there something with a non-standard user agent that talks to the internet every 5 minutes? You can sort of pull this stuff out of, like, if you're getting all of your data, and then just passing it through this. You don't even need to store it very long. Looking for that sort of telemetry to do with time series stuff. Techniques like Kalman filtering is really common to find outliers in a data set. Finding the person who's in a particular group who doesn't behave like the others. Why does one person in a team have a pattern that no one else has? All of that type of behaviour. Grouping things by time and day and week. It's good if you got like data about like when people are on holidays. People who log in while they're on holidays definitely should be a break from the pattern. You should lock people out of your network. A lot of people don't. I'm not going to explain Bayes' theorem. Everyone would fall asleep. I realise it's the afternoon and you haven't had your afternoon coffee yet. It comes from like the 1770s. It was published after Bayes' death. It had a bit of a renaissance when Paul Graham realised that you could use it for spam filtering. So you're basically looking at the probability of a hypothesis given the evidence. It is equal to the probability of the evidence given the hypothesis times the probability of the hypothesis divided by the probability of the evidence. Watch some YouTube videos about it, but you can basically take, if you flick it around a bit, you can take two theories that you have, so this is an attacker or this is a legit user, and based on the data that you've previously captured about them, you can weigh the likelihoods of those two things and go like, well, should I treat this as bad or should I treat this as good? Like, we've been using it in anti-spam since the 1990s, but everyone sort of forgot about it for using things like this. It's a very robust method you can use for anything. Yeah, so it dates back to the abacus. But yeah, it's very good to check the probability to see whether something fits a pattern or not, or to tune rules. Term frequency by the inverse document frequency is another one. If you've got web queries and they contain the word select and the word union, do any of your known good traffic from your testing environment have that? No. How many bad things you got off the internet have them? A heap. Therefore, if you see the word union, regardless of whatever else is around it in a query going to your web server, like it's going to fall in the you should probably block that bucket or at least log it. So like, look at some of this stuff. Like, and this is when you find people who are selling you some amazing machine learning thing. All they're basically doing in most cases is counting the number of occurrences of a particular term. They've got a list of stuff that's bad. They run it on a good instance for a while to see what's good, and they're basically just balancing the probability of the two. It's really not that hard. And there's all sorts of advanced stuff, but you probably don't need it. In terms of implementing stuff, we use the Elk stack a fair bit, which is Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. They're free to use, or you can buy support. I would generally recommend people have a multi-tool model for this stuff. The landscape is moving very quickly. We quite often find people who have spent a lot of money on a particular set of tooling which is no longer the new hotness, and it just sort of like rots in the data center. So build your architecture so that you've got a way of distributing logs and things that come into multiple places instead of having one proprietary data store where you can't get it out anymore. But the Elk stuff is good if you're getting started. You can install it, you can get it running in a day, and it doesn't cost you any money other than the desktop you put it on. Or you probably want bigger than that, but yeah. ElastAlert is a free piece of software that you can use for running alerts out of things that appeared in Elasticsearch. Nice and quick, easy. You can write rules in a YAML file. It's, yeah, neat. It comes from Yelp, but yeah, it's nice and easy, and you can extend it a bit. Yeah, Capacitor, as I mentioned before, if you're doing smart time series stuff, if you've got someone who has a PhD in statistics or some sort of pure maths that they're not using, and I know that there's plenty of them rotting around the place, particularly if you're a university, there's lots of math people just haunting the halls trying to find something useful to do. Maybe pull them in and look at how you can analyse your time series data. Splunk Machine Learning is pretty new, actually. That's weird, I've never seen that. They released it in September, I think, in a beta release. I think it's pretty stable now, so you can do all the basic machine learning stuff in Splunk, run statistical models, train a model, find what's weird. For this type of thing I'm talking about, if you already have a Splunk license, it's awesome because you can just go like, here's good stuff, here's bad stuff. You work it out, Splunk. You don't need to worry about the math. Elastic, they've got their XPack, which is like the thing that you pay for. They have a new machine learning thing in it too, which looks pretty neat, but the website said call us to find out how much it costs. I usually take that as a bad sign, but they're probably floating around here somewhere. You can probably ask them. But yeah, also, once again, being able to apply machine learning models inside your logging tools. Really sweet. Oops, I had other things. But yes. Oh, I'm missing a point. I'm really hyped for the idea of a common language to express these things in. The new STIX standard, admittedly we have a fair bit to do with STIX and taxi, but the new STIX standard has a thing called patterns in it, which is, they have a common language, or what's intended to be a common language for how to describe these sorts of patterns. The idea is that when it's a properly accepted standard, which it pretty much is right now, you'll be able to actually have rules that you can share with other people. Everyone can run it across different tools. It's all magic. And there's also OpenC2, which is being adopted, which is a common language for doing orchestration. So I want you to delete this file off this machine. It'll mean that you can have your logging stuff, have a standard language for deploying to like an endpoint device to say, get rid of this file, do this, do that. At the moment, it's sort of Tower of Babel. Everyone's got different tools talking different languages. It's very hard. There's a few people that will sell you something that will sort of join that together for you, but it'd be nice if everyone just spoke the same language. I'm pretty hyped for that to happen. If you're not doing this stuff yet, and you're not ready to do this stuff, at least just start logging things, and then you can always test your rules about what it would have looked like when you run back through it. And that is approximately that. I've got a bunch of things about some stuff you can look at if you want to learn more about this. Some of them, it doesn't quite fit on the screen, but anyway, I'll tweet them anyway. Oh, you'll have to take a photo anyway, you're very keen. Anyway, so thank you very much. Thanks to Goats of Anarchy for that awesome picture of the goat that wears its duck suit. Apparently it has anxiety issues and it feels better in a suit, so it just like rocks around in it all day. If it works for the goat, that's great. So yes, thank you very much, and any questions?